Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of Blue Truth and Bourbon. I'm your host, Steve, and I can see nobody is on yet, but we'll hopefully wait for at least one person to come on before we get to that. There's a couple of people that just logged on, so any comments are welcome and necessary so that we can have good conversation. Tonight, as you can see in the memo section, we're going to be talking about intelligence in sharing in law enforcement and sometimes the lack thereof, and how that affects law enforcement and the things that we do and the things that happen. So tonight, our guest, or my special guest, is Andrew Fry, a friend of mine, former Secret Service and Orlando police officer. Says it there at the bottom now. So Andy, welcome. Appreciate you being here with us.
It's an honor to be on, man. It's great to watch this show progress and take off as organically, like you started off, and you're doing great things, man.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like getting on here and as much as I can and sharing my opinion. I know not everybody shares my opinion, but I like to get it out there, make people think. Um, Especially last week when I talked about DEI and my whole thought process on what DEI means to me. So, and then of course, the president got on TV today and pushed out a bunch of DEI theories on what happened in Washington last night. So it was very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
So, but Andy, why don't you give everybody a little introduction to yourself? Tell everybody what you do and what you did, and so they can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm a retired police officer from Orlando PD. Started my career off 2003 era with Altamont Springs PD after I graduated the academy. Came in young. Went to the academy when I was 19. Got hired there within like a year after that, and did a short time at Altamont because I was already processing with Secret Service. And as soon as I turned 21, pretty much I got picked up with Secret Service Uniform Division, and uh, did just under 2 years over there. Kind of changed the career path that I wanted to do. I went in Secret Service wanting to do the counter sniper role, and when I got to when you at least in that era, Secret Service was kind of like, when you get on the job, we'll let you know more about it kind of thing. There really wasn't much on the internet. There wasn't much available, and I kind of thought I had my career outlined with what I wanted to do. I got up there and kind of quickly realized that counter sniper wasn't like a full career kind of thing at that point. And as the guys say up there, all roads lead back to the box, which meaning like a little guard shack kind of thing at the White House or whatever. And I did my thing in the box, and I was like, man, I can't see doing 25 years, pushing a red or a green button and running magnetometers. And now, granted, Secret Service, I'm not taking nothing away from them guys. They do some incredible things. It's just, I got a taste of law enforcement early on, and I kind of just realized, you know what, I really want to do the police thing, not the protection kind of thing. And thankfully, Orlando PD was hiring 75 guys at the time. I'm a third generation City of Orlando employee, and my dad let me know, hey, OPD's hiring, and they picked me up pretty quick. And I did just under 9 years. I got injured in line of duty, and unfortunately, right as my career was really going the direction I wanted it to go, the injury kind of set me down, and I got my medical retirement from them. So I did 12 years in law enforcement, and while I was working in law enforcement, started working on the executive side, doing anything simple executive work to, all the way up to executive protection. I've done that now for almost 16 years, which is where we got to meet, fortunately. And
Right.
shout out to one of your former guests, Brian Chakowski. He introduced us through that line of work, and great guy. And without Brian, my career would be different, and we wouldn't know each other. So
Yeah, you're not on the show tonight if Brian doesn't introduce us. So there we go, Brian Chakowski. Good on
yeah.
you. So, well, no, good. I'm glad to have you here. Like you said, we worked together on some protection details. So um, the last 2 years, it seems like we've had conversations about everything you can imagine, from uh, just you being a Richard Childress guy and me being a Rick Hendrick guy, to all the stories that we've shared, our war stories and law enforcement, and just you know, stuff like we're going to talk about tonight. We had a conversation this past weekend about the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. So it's always good to sit down with somebody and have those conversations, and expand your mind. For those of you watching, Andy is much smarter than I am. The conversations we have, I really enjoy. Um, so hopefully tonight, if you're watching live, or if you're watching as we record it, you're watching it on Spotify or on YouTube, or even on one of the Facebook pages. Um, don't hesitate to put your comments in. If you're watching tonight, you're live with us now, give me a shout, comment, let me know you're here. I see there's a couple of people watching, so uh, yeah, just let us know what you think, because it's important to develop the show and everything. So these conversations that we have, make people think, and that's what's important to me, is that we share our ideas and thoughts together, and we go from there. It's funny that we're going to be talking about intelligence sharing tonight, because I've been watching a lot of the coverage today on the airplane crash with the Black Hawk helicopter, and I read an article today where I guess a lot of experts uh, have talked about the near misses over the last few years, and of course, none of us knows anything about that, because that doesn't get shared with the public, the general public. But uh, just the idea of experts are out there talking about this stuff, and the information is not trickling down to the point where we've done something about it. And it's unfortunate that something like this has to happen in order for us to reflect on, well, man, we should have listened to that person. We should have talked about this, because we have 67 people that are no longer with us, because maybe somebody didn't share the right information. So
Yeah, I was just reading the same stuff before we went live here. Very sad. I certainly hope the DEI stuff doesn't play into factor with that, but I'm nervous it may have something to do, but time will tell.
yeah, and I noticed during the press conference that unfortunately a lot of people, when they hear DEI, they equate it with race,
Correct.
and that's not what the president is talking about. The FAA has uh, been relaxed in the last 4 years in their hiring processes, and and I read this a couple of years ago during the Biden administration, that they're hiring people with mental disabilities and things of that nature, and
Yeah.
we're, that person already has a lot of stress in their life, and then we're giving them the most stressful job in the world
Yeah.
of handling 7 to 10 airplanes and whatever else at any given moment, for however long they have. I'm sure they have to work an hour or so on the flight line before they get a break. So, and probably working somewhere close to 10 to 12 hour shifts.
Yeah.
So it's very scary thought process there. But so yeah, we talked this weekend about sharing intelligence and law enforcement, and some of the hindrances, some of the reason that maybe information doesn't get shared, or does get shared, but maybe not all of the information. In your career, and you can use both federal and the local. Um, what, in your opinion, what are some of the issues that you have seen, behind the reasons behind why maybe information doesn't get to where it needs to get to?
I think the traditional one of guys wanting to be the one that cracks a case, and they want to hold that information near and dear. I think that was an issue during 9/11 between the intelligence agencies, and working in the federal government, and then coming down to a local level, uh, especially like when you start working in the drug world, you see it over there, and it's the same kind of um, mentality, even in the drug world, of, well, I don't want to tell anybody about the street we're working, or these guys, or share this intel, even though we have platforms and systems to either deconflict, or make sure other guys aren't working the same case. You see guys just flat out not sharing intelligence because they want to be the first to get the case, or they're trying to get that promotion, or they're trying to go to
Right.
that unit. We see it on the intelligence side too, and it's sickening because we learned that lesson in blood in American lives, with 9/11. And so I would say that's probably something that's always going to be around, and we just have to be better safeguards and have better leadership.
Right.
To the young guys and gals coming up, we have got to instill a different path and a way of thinking for them. I think the biggest thing that worries me nowadays is and it didn't exist that I know of, or maybe not anywhere near what it is now, during the 9/11 era and right after, is the political correctness,
Right.
where agencies don't want to be the one that gets published in the media talking about, whether it be a religion or anything. Um, they don't want to be in the media now, saying, "Hey, we have this big problem with say Antifa group or something in our area, and we've been able to stop all these things, but we're really asking for public assistance with this." There's a lot of police chiefs and sheriffs and all the county and city officials. They don't want to get their name attached to that kind of stuff. So now you've got the politicization of intelligence, and people scared to really put the info out. That's what really scares the hell out of me, in 2025, with the men and women that are out there putting their lives on the line and trying to keep us safe. That flow of information needs to be free and get out there as far as possible. OPSEC in mind, the guys and gals deserve to have the information,
Right.
to be able to stop things.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked a lot about that. We talked about the fact that people want the glory and, and especially when you now, I'm not so much talking about on the federal level in this instance, but it's true of them too. But the lack of interagency communication, because you and I worked for, I won't call it competing agencies, but we worked for two different agencies in the same county.
Right.
And I when I was a supervisor in the robbery unit, we had weekly robbery meetings with the Orlando Police Department, that with all the municipalities within the county, and there was a lot of info sharing that went on. Because we're all looking for the same bad guys.
Yeah.
And, they don't. It's not like they just. Well, I'm only going to rob places in Orange County. I'm not going to go into the city of Orlando or Ocoee or Winter Park or what have you. So, but at the same time, I've been in units where, just like you said, hey, let's hold this close to the vest because we don't want the Orlando Police Department or yada yada agency coming in and making an arrest on one of our guys when they happen to slip over the line.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, and I most of that stuff is small time stuff, like you talked about in the drug world, and it's not these major things that could cause catastrophic events that we're not sharing with each other. We have the Central Florida what's it
Fusion
called?
Center.
Fusion Center. Thank you. Lost it for a second. So we get a lot of intel from there, but even then, like we talked this weekend, it almost, it really, to me, it kind of trickles back to that, um, everybody wants to get the glory kind of thing, and they want to be the one to break the big case, and like, but when it comes down to it, like you said, um, it has ended up costing us in lives because, I mean, we had 9/11. I mean, there was information out there,
Yeah.
and they just didn't act on it. And I was
Yeah.
reading an article today, and I should have written it down where this guy, what he does for work, but his name's Eric Dahl, and he talked about the connecting the dots, and connecting the dots, according to him, is understanding the signs and the signals that are out there, and then basically weeding out what's real, what's pertinent, what's relevant, and what can be worked, and moving forward from there. And the cooperation from there. We saw it with 9/11. Of course, we saw it no matter which side of the aisle you're on. We saw it with January 6th because they were offered National Guard by the president. You know, the mayor, sent a declination saying, nope, we don't want it. So regardless of which side of the aisle you're on there, we had the information, we did nothing with it,
Yeah.
or we let the politics of it get in the way.
Yeah. What really scares me, like going back to what I was saying, is the political side of things. And, so if we touch on terrorism related stuff right now with what's going on, a trend that I can see just as a former law enforcement guy and paying attention and social media and the media everywhere else, you see a lot of the Palestinian type protests that are now spinning into, if you look at the crowds, you're starting to see a lot of the former Antifa guys that may have shown up back in 2020 to those kind of events are now getting intertwined in these kind of crowds. And I do have some friends that still work in some fun places in the government, and we've had some chats recently about this, and it's scary because there's recruitment that is going on now on the homeland side that we would have never seen during 9/11. You would have been very hard pressed to find American citizens that didn't really subscribe to that really fundamentalist religious belief that would go along with the kind of terrorist threats we're looking at. And now you're seeing people who had no problem burning buildings down, burning police cars down, murdering law enforcement officers or assaulting, everyday Americans that are now rubbing elbows with some bad actors that are in the States. And what I fear is if cities and counties or state level, federal level, if they sit on information right now because they're worried about upsetting, whatever political group that's out there, or, I'm sure a lot of politicians, the last thing they want to do is upset either side of the Israel or Palestinian conflict going on right now. And they don't want to be made to see, oh, well, we're having problems now with terrorist recruitment amongst this crowd. It's scary because we're looking at so much more of a threat right now than when I first got into law enforcement. Our enemies are far more well-funded now. 9/11 was carried out on I believe I've heard it said many times, $500,000 budget. Our enemies are funded to the tunes of billions now, and they're far more sophisticated. They've learned a lot of lessons through fighting the global war on terror against us, and and to know that the numbers and the trends that have come over our border, especially in the last few years, it scares the hell out of me. And we as a law enforcement community, we have to be doing everything we can to make sure that intelligence is shared. And then when politics starts getting in the way of that, we've got to be brave enough to push back against that, because if we don't, at the end of the day, people are going to lose their lives.
Yeah. And it would be one thing if we were talking about the lack of resources and to gather intelligence and the short staffed or something like that, the inability to gather the information. But with the technology that we have today, even at the local level, even because both agencies that we've worked at have real-time crime centers now, so there's a lot of information flowing through on a daily basis. They're sitting there listening to the police radio within minutes or seconds, probably 30 to 45 seconds of getting a call at an address. They have all the information on that address that they need if it's there.
Yeah.
Who lives there, what's going on. So if it were a lack of ability to gather the resources, that would be one thing.
Yeah.
But we have the technology that we have goes far beyond any that I've ever imagined, especially as you get up into the federal level, because obviously there's military stuff that far outweighs anything that we've got. And I got not military, but federal level. I got to see a little bit of it when we got to when we were looking for Marquis Floyd, and some of the stuff that we don't have that the federal government came in and go, hey, we're going to let you use this.
Right.
And and obviously I'm not going to share what that is, but the technology is out there, and the days of And I'll be honest with you, go back, I don't know, 10, 15 years, um, especially when the Fusion Center came online. We were getting, I was getting bulletins all the time. Um, and 2 years ago when I left, I couldn't tell you, I, I might have gotten one or two a year in that year.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like the information went away. Like certain groups were, it's my football and, I'm going to play with it and you're not allowed to play with it. And, and New Orleans, I don't know that any New Orleans, but what strikes me about New Orleans is this: within hours, and I'm talking, when I say hours, I mean 24 hours, 48 hours, we had more information on that guy than we have to this day on the kid that tried to shoot President Trump.
Yeah.
So somebody's radar was pinging with this guy long before New Orleans. It had to be. I
Yeah.
mean, because you just can't hide. I know that I had a program at the sheriff's office where I could draw a geofence around an area and put keywords that I'm looking for on social media in there. And if somebody came up with bomb or gun or what have you, I was getting notified that, hey, this person just mentioned something about this.
Right.
So you can't tell me that this guy was that good, that uh, especially being on military bases and stuff like that, that he was able to get away with what he did without being on somebody's radar. So it
Yeah.
just seems to me that, you know, I don't know what it is. I don't know why we're not sharing intel like we should be. And like I said earlier, it comes down to uh, something like this, a tragedy that happens, and this may have had nothing to do with intelligence, but it just goes to show that it takes a tragedy for us to sit down and go, okay, well, we got to change this.
Yeah.
We got to do something about this. And there's plenty of people, in my opinion, that are out there that are forward thinkers, they think outside the box. Man, there's just so much stuff that we could probably be way ahead of ourselves if we really sat down and focused on that. And so, this intelligence stuff that we're dealing with today, I don't know. I don't know where we go. I don't know how it gets better.
Yeah.
Um,
Talking
yeah,
about it is a good step. I mean, the
yeah,
men and women that are out there, they're kind of muzzled with what they can say in a public space, but there's plenty of guys and gals that are getting out of the career and have the ability to reach out and say, hey, these are the things that I'm seeing, and we need to improve on these kind of things. That's outside of the house. Inside of the house, as trainers, as leaders, we need to ensure that we are constantly refreshing the new generation. Something we discussed over the race over the weekend.
right.
We have an entire generation of law enforcement that was not even born or were, infants when 9/11 occurred. And so to them, uh, the world may not be as much of a threatening place as it was to guys like us that were in uniform either shortly after or even during it. And it just that drove my entire career, especially starting off young at the White House with Secret Service. We had so much intelligence that was shared with us back then, and saw a lot of things that to this day I don't think have ever been talked about in the media that were going on in the Washington D.C. area at that time. When I came to my local law enforcement career, I mean, it was a switch that I couldn't turn off as far as really paying attention to what's going on. And as a local cop, you're not really dealing too much with, big terror threats, whether it be like a local, group or an international group or whatever it is. It's not really your bread and butter as a uniformed police officer. But at the end of the day, the deputies and the officers and the troopers that are out there, they're probably going to be the kind of guys and gals that are the first to make some kind of contact with any kind of a threat that's out there, whether it be a traffic stop that something just seemed off, and their spidey cop senses goes up, and you know what, they need to have. So we talked about this. I had an experience as a young police officer at Orlando, and I had the benefit of having my background, and then a really good friend of mine. We were partners for a long time. he was on scene for it, and I got to see his perspective because he had only worked local law enforcement, only gone through a local academy. So the way he was taught to think and react as a police officer was different than my experience. And um, it was over by the Holy Land Park that was in Orlando, and we were coming. I think it was close to the anniversary of 9/11 coming up. A simple traffic encounter with a group of guys that just really, it turned into some spidey senses real quick. There was a lot of really weird things that were going on with it. And for my partner, it was something, hey, let's kick them loose and get back on the clock. We got calls holding or whatever. But, thankfully for the amazing training that I was afforded, it really set off a lot of red flags for me. And at the time, I had a pipeline to be able to share that with our intelligence division and say, hey, I don't have charges here, but there's so many red flags. We did some investigative work on scene, and we're able to hand that off. And like I was telling you before, didn't hear back for quite a while on it, but that ended up spinning into some different things in different jurisdictions. And one of the guys ended up becoming affiliated with something else. And at that point, I wasn't really privy to any more information on it. So God only knows, how far that went. But, I say this because whether it's Ted Bundy or Timothy McVeigh, you look at all of these people, and what's the one thing that we see with it? It wasn't the FBI HRT team that did the takedown and got them. It's usually the locals that are
Right.
coming into contact, and we really need to make sure we're doing a good job teaching our young go-getters and our cops that are out there, hey, clearly you're going to be doing 99% of your job just focusing on local law enforcement issues. But, there does come a time where you see something, you need to say something. And these are the ways to do it. This is how we share it. The Fusion Center in Central Florida, excellent resource. And we have to put that intel out there. You go down to Parkland, Florida, with that guy that murdered those kids in that high school. And then the information that comes out afterwards of what locals knew of the complaints against him, and then what the federal government knew with complaints to the FBI. And you look at that, and that is just a complete failure of intelligence. And yeah, hindsight's 2020. I get it, but with all of the pieces of that puzzle, somebody should have been able to do something with that. And the best that I've been able to gather from that, because that event really ticked me off, and I tried to keep my thumb on the pulse of that for as long as information was coming out from it. And I ended up working a job down that way a few years ago and ran into some locals, and we discussed it heavily. And the ball was dropped. The intelligence was just, the pieces were there, nobody put them together, and lives were lost.
Yeah, and it's like you said, I get it. There are groups that are out there that are working this kind of stuff that don't necessarily want to share the information. But like you said, ultimately, it may be a local that just stumbles upon something.
Yeah.
And if they don't have that information, they get hurt. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And to me, like we talked about at this past weekend, you know, it's very easy. And I know this, when I say this, I realize the other side of it as well, but it's very easy for the groups that are working this kind of stuff, especially, if you say, okay, it's a local thing. Um, it's very easy for them to say, hey, look, this is the information that's out there. Don't go looking for this. Don't go looking for this guy. Don't go stumble into this area because this is what we're working.
Right.
And if you do, there's going to be pretty heavy consequences. And you're going to have those officers, deputies, troopers that go, yeah, no, this is going to be my bust. I'm going to make my name here. You're going to have that. But I would think that the vast majority of the folks are going, okay, at least I have the information and I know that if I stumble upon this, my spidey senses need to be super high. I need to figure out how to get out of this situation or get the right people involved in this situation to help me out here, as opposed to I do a traffic stop on a guy that I have no information about and he comes out of the car shoot.
Yeah.
So, and like Scott commented on here, obviously, and it's what we've been talking about. The interagency relationship. Uh, we got to get better at that. Um, yeah, I agree, Scott. Thanks for being here. Jurisdictional conflicts and, like you said, operational differences. I know that during a few events, Pulse, I know there was some conflict between the sheriff's office and Orlando PD because of the different ways that we do things. But I think we learned some things out of that, because the way that we handled, the way that the sheriff's office handles large scale events, and uh, you know, the command post, and how we kept track of everybody that we knew was there, and how we did that was something that the Orlando Police Department picked up on during Pulse. And that's something that we got from the fire department. The fire department is excellent at that stuff, because they just come over, the lieutenant gets there, and he hands the battalion chief everybody's name on a Velcro pad, and it's stuck on the board, and they know where everybody's at. So,
Yeah.
But you know, those things are hard to break down, because we get set in our ways. We do things a certain way, and for us to try to pick up on somebody else's stuff and do it a different way, or um, we don't have the program that you have, or you don't have the program that we have, to get the information, or to gather the intel.
Yeah.
There's and that that happens, especially like in the smaller agencies, especially here, like local. It happens everywhere, but I use local because that's what I know. Cities like Gotha, and even like even the bigger but the smaller agencies, St. Cloud, Kissimmee PD. They don't necessarily have what Orlando has, and what Orange County Sheriff's Office has, or even what the Osceola County Sheriff's Office has. So,
Yeah.
um, and at some point, I think it's incumbent upon leadership, like we've said, like you've said, it's incumbent upon the leadership of those places to make sure that we're having those meetings, we're having those briefings, we're having that information sharing, the intelligence sharing, because I don't know what's going to happen when I show up at Curry Ford and Cimarron with a terrorist attack. And well, I don't know why they'd be there. I mean, maybe the McDonald's is under attack or something right there. I don't know. But I just use that for geographical purposes, because that's close enough to the county and close enough to the city where we could, say we have a plane crash, something falls out of the sky right there. Um, and so the difference is there, the intelligence that we have, the things that we use, we may not be doing on the same page. So,
Yeah.
there's got to be something where the leadership says, okay, how do we get on the same page? How do we write this so that everybody, because even when it comes down to just the radio traffic, it's different.
And
So,
I'd say to any of the guys and gals that may be watching that are wearing the uniform right now, especially the if anybody is younger in their career, something that really helped, as a midnight patrol young go-getter cop. Um, I was friends with guys from Orange County Sheriff's Office. We hung out outside of work and all, and it was in the Nextel, era where we could just beep each other's phone, whatever. And I can't even begin to remember how many times something would be going on in the county that was about to spill into the city, where we have this, multi-million dollar infrastructure for telecommunications, and we're not getting anything from dispatch. And God bless all of them. They're busy. They have a job to do. I'm not saying they dropped the ball, but live information sharing, and just the criminal aspects of it at a local level was incredible, what we could share amongst each other. And it was funny because you'd see a little pushback from the, not all, but some of the older generation at my agency. Oh, what are you hanging out with those guys for, kind of thing. And it's like, are you serious? Is there really that bad of a rivalry, kind of thing? And I think it was rare, but there was still that attitude. But just especially when we were working any kind of drug stuff, being able to reach out to my buddy over at the sheriff's office and completely unafraid to share with him information about what we're working, or our targets, or because we know that they're dancing in and out of the county. But at the end of the day, I didn't care who got the credit. Granted, I may have been working a pretty big case with my squad, and we put a lot of work together. We want to get some credit at the end of the day, but To me, it was far more important, and it was always more rewarding when I shared information with guys and gals from other agencies and was able to have those contacts. So I would highly recommend, if you're young in your career, or that's the kind of work you're doing, get outside of your own patch, and go meet some guys from other agencies, and make those contacts, because at the intelligence level, local law enforcement, we've already said it here before, we're going to be the first to see and hear anything that's going on out there. And being able to have a vast network of guys and gals to reach out to from other agencies in real time is just something that we can't really make a computer system for, or anything technologically that's going to work as good as you being able to pick up the phone and call your buddy. Well, hey, I know a guy in robbery over there, or hey, I know street crimes guy in that sector over there. Let me reach out, and hey, we're working this guy. Information showing that he frequents that area. Do you know him? We're trying to pick up some info on his car or something. And that real time data and sharing is just, it's crucial in our day and age.
Yeah, and sadly, um, what we're talking about here and the lack of sharing, um, it doesn't just happen interagency. It happens internal.
Yeah,
Um, like I said, each of our agencies has a, real time crime center, and I've seen guys from units come in there and just soaking in the stuff that's coming in, and things that these analysts are able to get for them. And then because at some point, being the acting lieutenant in there and being privy to a lot of the meetings and stuff, you know to end up watching these supervisors in those units walk away from it saying, hey, let's not share this with so and so, because they're known to screw things up, or let's not share anything with them because they're known to go in and steal stuff. And the days of that, man, they just have to be over. Now it's like Derek commented on here, it's gatekeeping is a culture in law enforcement. And you know, if that continues, and I'm not saying it's rampant. I'm not saying it's it I don't think it's as bad as it could be. But I do think that ultimately we do way more of gatekeeping than we should when it comes down to, because you just never know when, this guy that hit New Orleans, I mean, he was here in Tampa, probably was here in Orlando at some point.
yeah,
Um, you don't know where it's going to happen, or it's going to pop up. And like you and I talked this weekend, about, just about the intelligence sharing, is that, um, it's very easy for the folks out there that are in, Bangor, Maine, to go, well, it's not going to reach here.
yeah,
Yes, that's sad and horrible, but it's not going to reach here, until it does. Until we have and we talked about this, the way that the border has been open for the last 4 years. There are, eh, what's her name? Sarah Adams. Is that what her
yep,
name is?
yep,
Uh, at her estimation, thousands of soldier aged men from countries that do not like us, that want us hurt bad, are here.
yeah,
And like you said, now we're seeing the Antifa folks that are rubbing elbows with them. And not that it's recruiting for the ideology as much as it's recruiting for the damage that can be done.
yeah,
They're not maybe not converting these guys to Islam, but like we talked about, hey, remember that, stuff you guys did over 2020 and 2021, 2022 era. Um, would you mind doing some of that stuff for us?
yeah,
And burning buildings and shooting and throwing stuff at cops, or, killing cops, or whatever, it progresses to. So there's enough people here that, and you and I agreed on this, that at some point, I believe that there will be a coordinated attack, simultaneous, maybe not, like we said, like you said, not 120101, but at the very minimum, a wave that could occur across the United States of stuff that's going to happen, people that are going to get hurt, and terrorist attacks. And And if that's not something that these agencies are sharing, if we didn't learn from 9/11, from January 6th, from Fort Hood, um, from the USS Cole, um, those were failures.
Yeah.
And the next failure, how many people have to die uh,
Yeah.
because of a failure?
And if we're having failures at the bottom level, whether it be drugs, whether it be uh, gang involvement in cities, if we're failing at those levels, how do we expect to get the big things correct? Because we're breeding a culture in law enforcement. And, I think there's so many lessons that law enforcement can learn from the special operations community and the military. And I'm blessed to have a good amount of friends that come from that community. And something I just always admire, whether it's the Navy side, the Army side, whatever it is, those guys just they don't want the credit. They're team players. They're all about the team. I'm sure they have their inside and internal struggles also, but it just really strikes me that the guys that do that kind of job and that kind of work, they are just so hyper focused on the mission and not getting the credit for it. It doesn't matter, who pulled the trigger on Osama, right? The
Right.
team got him, right? A whole massive amount of people. Now, granted, somebody wrote a book, but what?
Right.
Anyways, we have to get it right at the small local level if we're going to get things right at the big level. And at the beginning of the show, to circle back to it, our enemy, our biggest enemy that we're facing, terrorist wise right now, they're funded far beyond the imagination that they probably ever thought they would be funded to. And sadly, a lot of that comes from us, the U.S. taxpayers.
Right.
And they have many other ways that they bring in wealth. They're better trained. They have experts in different fields that they never would have had before. And the estimates right now is that there's a lot of really bad actors that have made their way into the states, and it scares the hell out of me. I have somebody close to me that works in the intelligence community, and granted, they don't share anything illegal to share with me, but we have some direct conversation on, hey, how bad are things right now? Like, without sharing anything, you can't. Like, what's the weather forecast look like? And the latest that I've heard is it's worse than you could possibly imagine as far as the terrorism side. And my question to this person was more along the lines of, this is what I'm seeing from pretty relevant sources right now online. Does that kind of stand true to what you're seeing in the intelligence community? And without divulging anything they can't divulge, the answer was yeah, and it's way worse than that. So
Yep.
our first responders are going to be the ones that are going to be first on scene to the next big thing that goes on. What New Orleans, horrible, horrific attack, but at the end of the day, the kind of enemy that we're up against, that's nothing for them to put something like that on. And since I went to FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, it's kind of where my career took a change into the learning a little bit more about the Al Qaeda threat back then and all that kind of stuff. One thing we know about our enemy right now is they're patient, and they are very, very smart, and they will study the crap out of us before they'll put a mission together. And if they can't pull off a mission the exact way that they want to pull it off, they'll typically wait. And if like, look at the first bombing of the World Trade Center, that didn't go off the way they wanted to. They didn't come back the next year and go after it again. They bid their time, and that's the enemy we're up against right now. And that enemy has only grown on a global scale. They're no longer, back when I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened, and I just remember thinking back then that this enemy, the Al Qaeda and Taliban, these guys are in caves in Afghanistan or something like that, and that may have been true of some other group back then, but nowadays we have to think of these guys as every bit as funded and as functioning as the biggest cartels in the drug world that are out there. And our people have to be ready for what's coming down the pipe. And I'm terrified, for our men and women, for my friends, for my family, of what we face, because we are so vulnerable. And if you and I can sit here and come up with a top 10 list of vulnerabilities just in Central Florida alone, so can our enemies. And I would highly advise the men and women that are still wearing the uniform right now, know your area, know your district, know your hotspots of what a massive target would be in your areas. And I would really advise you to come up with a plan of how to respond if something kicks off over there. Whether, say, you patrol in the area of the Mall of Millennia in Orlando, um, you know, probably not the biggest target in the world, but I could see it. A mass casualty kind of event, it could have some significance. If you have to respond there, you might want to think about, because the type of enemy that we're talking about here, they're big into secondary devices. They're big into targeting the first responders when they come on scene. We got to think smarter and more outside the box than these evil people will. How would you get to a call like that should something horrible happen?
Right.
That as you're responding, it's starting to sound like over the radio, this is more than just a local gang got in a gunfight in the parking lot or something. We're talking about explosives, and now we're talking about an active shooter. Let's go ahead and think about this. May be a terrorist level event. Like a buddy of mine, when he was responding to Pulse, I remember he fired off a text to me, "Hey, looks like we're responding to a terrorist attack." And I'm sure that night, none of the men and women who were on duty thought that they would ever be responding to something like that. And in the city of Orlando, we know now that the guy, he was a cop, he was a wannabe, he wasn't necessarily an ISIS guy, but the going back to the threat level that we're looking at, we've got to be switched on. We can't fail on the intelligence side. We have to share, intelligence. And it's one thing for all of us to sit here and say, yeah, I may not tell the boys about the dope house I'm working right now, but if it was something terrorist related, obviously I would share that information. This is a culture thing, man. And we saw it fail with CIA, with FBI, with all the intelligence agencies, with Osama bin Laden, and it blew my mind when they just did a basic course at FLETC talking about our failures and what happened there. I couldn't believe it. I was embarrassed for our country how bad we dropped that ball. It pissed me off, and we as locals, we can't fail like that. Let's breed a culture of, not only guys and girls that help each other out, whether it's you're driving home and you pass a guy in another jurisdiction. I was the kind of guy that would only stop. I don't care where I was. When I lived in Oviedo, I stopped and backed Oviedo cops, until they gave me the thumbs up or until they were done. Whether it's having each other's backs that way, or it's sharing intelligence and not worrying about who gets credit for something.
Right. Yeah, and it goes to a point that Scott was making, because you were talking about knowing your area and knowing the places that something may happen. But yeah, Scott, I agree with you. There it's just a bunch of call takers today, unfortunately, and the people that are proactive in learning their area or learning the people in their area, learning the people in their zone. I know when I was in charge of the Delta Squad, we had a program where we had everybody we came in contact with. We took a picture. We had their name, their date of birth, and any descriptors that we had, and we shared that program with everybody that worked the area. So, I mean, and it was, by the time we were done, I mean, it was quite the program of people,
Yeah.
So, but it's not happening anymore. And,
It comes down to leadership, man.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I had a captain when I was in patrol that he would chew our ass if crime was going on in our district, and investigate the investigative bureau CID wasn't able to go pull an FIR out. And if we had prints on a burglary thing that was going down, and we didn't have FIRs to identify field interview reports. Sorry for the police jargon, but if we didn't have these FIRs on these guys, our captain held us accountable. Hey,
Right.
Ownership, man. This is your area. How do you not know who's playing in your backyard over here? And I can't even be, and I'm sure you could tell stories all night too. How many times that we solve crimes based on that really good street cop level, just knowing the people in your backyard, stepping out with people, and to what you were saying, I still am friends with a lot of guys that are on duty, and we swap stories of how things used to be and what the radio traffic sounds like now and how quiet it is and the arrest levels and all that. And it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's like, what are we missing when we're not making those proactive stops? What are we missing when we're not just doing a basic consensual encounters? As a field training officer, I felt like that was the hardest thing to force recruits, in I taught third phase. So when they came to me, it blew my mind that guys had not done consensual encounters yet. And they were terrified to do it, and just talking to some of the guys, from my former agency, getting down to topics like that, they're like, no one's doing that kind of stuff anymore. Now, I'm sure there's still some really awesome people that, on a micro level that are out there doing the work still, not taking anything away from you guys and gals, go get it. But law enforcement is a culture thing. Everything I know, everything that I was blessed to learn came from the really amazing men and women that came before me that handed it down to me. And we have got to make sure that this new generation coming up is getting it better than what we had it, and to hear that young officers, aren't doing as much proactive work. And I get it. I understand that the career is a different place nowadays. You have threats from, the political side of the police department or sheriff's office. You got to worry about maybe a state attorney or something. I get it. Protect yourselves at all costs. But at the same time, we have a duty to the people that we protect in the community. We have a duty to do our jobs. We have a duty to get out there and making, these encounters happen, because that's where the intelligence comes from. If you're a patrol level guy, especially if you're first few years on, you're just, steaming out there wanting to do work. If you don't already have informants that you've established, I would challenge you to step it up, because, police work comes down, like when you start doing the investigative side, whether you're working robbery, whether you're working drugs, homicide, it doesn't matter. Your informants are going to be one of your biggest assets. And those informants typically are coming from proactive police work that puts us into contact with these people. Crime Line's a great resource. We get great tips through Crime Line. But at the end of the day, most of my big cases were made off of people that maybe they jaywalked in front of my patrol car, and I got out, talked to them, and it turned into a multi-year long relationship where we were solving cases based off that intelligence,
Yeah, I had a guy. So I would feed my informants. I would I had one guy that, I gave him money one day. I said, don't do anything wrong with this, man. And drove back by a couple hours later, and hey, Strick, just want to let you know I bought a brand new shirt, with this, and showed me the shirt they bought, because he had, he'd been wearing the same shirt for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and he gave me a lot of good information. Unfortunately, he ended up buying a gun at some point, not with my money, but and killing somebody by the old Orlando Arena. So now he's serving life in prison. But I had people that, that gave me plenty of info. And yeah, you're right. That's important. Is it going to recover? Are we going to? There's guys out there that do it. Or is it going to be like it was? I can't see it, just because I don't think anybody's teaching it anymore. Like you said, you have people coming to you that just aren't, they haven't done this thing. And when I was a supervisor, and we had somebody training on my squad, I'd call the FTOs, hey, come over here and meet me. And I would tell them, hey, I don't care what else you do, you need to go to Kaylee and the trail, and they need to talk to everybody at that corner.
Yep.
They need to, even if it's, screw you, pound sand, and they walk away, they learn from that experience, and they're going to go talk to the next guy by the gas pumps. And then they're going to go talk to the guy over at the front of the store. But they got to talk. And that's how you gather intelligence. That's how you get these relationships. You're right. That's exactly what, So, I mean, we're winding up on an hour here. I don't want to go too much longer. Not that we couldn't, because we could probably go for another hour.
All night.
But, where do we go from here? I think, how do we prevent these failures? First of all, we have to enhance the interagency communication collaboration. There's got to be something done where we're encouraging communication and the information sharing across these different agencies, um, so that we don't have, another failure. We got to improve the data analysis using AI and stuff like that. With the technology we have today, um, we have to be able to analyze these threats more accurately. And I think AI is probably, and it's one of the president's, priorities. I think the president brought these folks on TV last week to kind of show what the public can look forward to with AI. But the military is way beyond that, and the military's been using it. And so the intelligence that's gathered there, hopefully, it's going to trickle down. Um, we have to our legal policies and stuff like that. And what I mean by that is we have to strengthen those, um, to strike the balance between the intelligence we have to gather and the public's civil rights. We have to balance how we collect that information, but at the same time, like I talked about earlier, the geofence, being able to extract what people were talking about on social media. Um, and like we just said, we have to be able to reinvest in human intelligence, gathering that information from sources, gathering that information from the informants on the street. Um, you know, I would hope that, and it's a grand dream of mine because it's not the case. We are going to see something horrible happen. Um, but my hope is that we get better at this really quick.
Yes,
Uh,
we have no choice.
Yeah, like we talked about over the weekend, it's if we don't, they're here. The people that we're talking about this intelligence, and like we talked about, you can't prevent murder. That's not what we're talking about, as
Right.
far as intelligence wise. But the sharing of information, the interagency cooperation has got to get better. And it's funny because if you go back and you look at all of the podcasts that I've done so far, and Mark DeBona just hit this again, which him and we've said this probably on every podcast that I've done. Every podcast that I've done, in my opinion, it goes back to one thing, and that's leadership.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that's where we are. I think ultimately that's where we have failed, or where our failures come from is from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have the people that are willing to give up the glory. We don't have the people that are willing to share the information.
Yeah.
And it's a sad state. I think it doesn't get better. I don't know. I hope so. Otherwise you and I will be having lots of conversations like this. And maybe my podcast will just take off and boom, because unfortunately we have to get on here and talk about another failure. I'd rather get on here and talk about the great things that are happening.
What I would kind of wrap this up, leave it with to any guys and gals wearing the uniform that may come across this video. Right now, as we're filming this, there is recruitment going on somewhere in your state, maybe in your jurisdiction. It's going on. Sadly, there's probably plans being put into place for attacks on the homeland, and all the signs point to it. All the red flags are there. Far, far more than pre 9/11. It's coming, and sadly, they're going to be able to strike in different areas. What I would leave you to think about is if there was something that you could have done as a local cop, some kind of information that you may have been able to gather from somebody that would have led to just peeling that thread, opening that onion of information up that could have led to something that stopped, are you going to be able to live with yourself if you just were sitting underneath the shade tree and waiting to go off, 10/7 at the end of your shift? If we're not able to go out there and do the proactive stuff because of the political climate, taking people to jail left and right, 3, 4, 5 arrests a night, okay, that's great. Let's get better at the intelligence side. Let's get better at talking to people. When I was at the White House shortly after 9/11, the threats that were shared with us at that time, I don't think there was a man or a woman that I came to work with in uniform, agent side or uniform side, that didn't come to work serious as a heart attack thinking we're going to get hit. It's coming. We know things that are going on around us. Some of us have been face to face with actors, from these groups around the White House. We know certain things that the U.S. government unfortunately let fall into the hands of our enemies that we were very fearful were going to be used against us on the homeland. We came into work every day with this serious mentality of it's coming. It's just a matter of when. Our locals, they have got to find a way to somehow have that kind of mentality when they come to work. Obviously, don't be paranoid. Don't drive yourself crazy. But let's really start shifting our focus as locals, as we are the first people that are going to encounter something out here.
Yeah.
Not on
Yeah.
our watch, man. Not if
And I'll
there's
tell you
something I
this.
can do about it.
I, I haven't shared this story before, but the 9/11 attacks. So the initial purchase of the tickets for those who took over the planes was actually from Orlando.
Yeah.
The guy lived in Orlando, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it was the card was declined or what it was, or if they, his credit card flagged, I'm purchasing these many tickets, so they out of different areas, so it was kind of weird. But we hit his house with the FBI, and so it's right here in our backyard.
Yeah.
It's right here where we're at, and wherever you're at, I'll tell you this as far as wherever you're watching this from, it's in your backyard. Small town, big town, it doesn't matter. It is in your backyard, and as they say, coming soon to a venue near you, a downtown restaurant area, a mall, a school. Because what better way than to harm our kids, like we talked about this past weekend? What better way than to set off uh, a bad thing in motion? And so, Andy, I appreciate you being here. Great episode. I appreciate what you do and everything you've given us. Obviously, you and I will talk more, and we'd love to have you back when we get some stuff to talk about. So, those of you who are watching, I appreciate you being here and watching. Don't hesitate to forward it to a friend. Recommend the podcast to them. Derek, I appreciate what you said. I try to get on here and share the information that I can, and like I said, if it doesn't go anywhere, that's great. It gives me something to do every week to vent and get out my frustrations, because I see a lot of stuff on television and in the news that I just, I can't tolerate, and it's a leadership thing.
Yeah. You got some great guests coming up, man. So
I'm looking forward to getting Mark on here, and anybody else. I'm really looking forward to where we go with this thing. We're only, honestly, I think this is episode 6 or 7. So I'm only 7 weeks into this thing, 6 weeks into this thing. So if it catches fire, maybe I'll put a message out on Truth Social and see if President Trump will tweet it out for me or put it on, so no, I kid, but thanks for being here. I didn't mention that I think it's Old Forester tonight, so go out and grab you some.
Good deal. Well, buddy, it's an honor to be on your show, man. I love what you're doing. And
I appreciate it.
I'm blessed to be in your presence, man. Thank you so much for having me.
No, I like I said beforehand, man, I enjoy talking to you. You're definitely way smarter than me. And it just, some of the things that you and I have talked about, hit home and really, give me the opportunity to think about some stuff. So I appreciate you coming on, and obviously you and I text about once a week, so it's not like we're not going to talk back and forth. So once we come up with some more stuff to talk about, I like getting on here with somebody else, because the back and forth and the I think the opportunity for the audience to engage as well is important to me. I don't edit any of this stuff because I don't, maybe because I'm lazy, but I just think it's better that it's fresh and it's organic, and people can watch it and either like it or not like it. And the live stuff gives me an opportunity to talk to you guys. Like Scott, I appreciate you being here. Derek, Mark, especially, Michelle and Danny. I saw you guys on here, so appreciate you guys watching. And those of you who are going to watch it later on Spotify or YouTube or on the Facebook pages, don't hesitate to comment. Add some comments down there. I like reading comments. I like suggestions. So anything you guys want to see, anything you want me to talk about, a couple episodes, that's the way it's been. Somebody texted me during the week and said, hey, I'd like to see you do something about this. So
Yeah.
don't hesitate to do it, and we'll get it out there for you. So appreciate you being here. Look forward to seeing you again next Thursday, and you'll probably see a couple updates during the week.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
If I could throw one more thing in there, anybody that watches this show, guys, Mark DeBona coming up whenever Steve has him on. Don't miss that episode. Share it, please. Mark I've known him for many, many years now, and great guy. But his message that he has today, it is so important to all of us. So please don't miss that episode and share it. Really put it out there, because Mark's message really needs to be hammered into our community. So
yeah, and if you guys haven't seen me talk about it before, or look at it on the Facebook pages, when we talk to Mark, we're going to be talking about PTSD. We're going to be talking about mental health and law enforcement. And there's a lot of young guys. So I know that most of you that watch this are my older friends that have been in law enforcement for quite some time, or are retired law enforcement. I suggest that if you've got any friends that are younger, or any children of your own that are in law enforcement now, recommend that you recommend that them watch that show, because just to learn from his experience, from our experience, from my experience, from those of you who are on here, the little comments that you can make that somebody else is going to see and may make a difference down the road, between them finding somebody that they can talk to, finding somebody that they can vent to, finding a resource, rather than harm themselves, because it's been way too prevalent here in the recent months and in my history. 25-year career in law enforcement, I don't know if I told you all this, but I had a girl that worked for me, promoted to corporal in February of 08. September of 08, she killed herself. So yes, and Mark DeBon is right. Those of you who are retired, or no retirees, I know that I mentioned this on the retiree page for the sheriff's office, but yes, a lot of retirees that get depressed, miss the job way too much, and don't have the camaraderie, or the friends, or the support system that a lot of us have. Recommend to watch the show when I have Mark on, because the more people that hear that message, the more people that are affected by that message, the wider that the message gets out, and the more people we help and more people we save. So it's important. So
yes.
Andy, thanks again. I'm going to shut it down, but if you want to stick around on the back end on your phone real quick, we'll talk, and then but thanks again for being here, Andy. Thanks for everybody watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right.